Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of JS Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at O Jesu, meine Lust, which translates to O Jesus, Master mine. This is a pretty straightforward chorale, has some interesting little harmonic tidbits. I feel like I say that at the beginning of every video, but still, I'll talk about them as we get to them throughout. But 1 sharp in the key signature, we start on D major over F sharp and we end on G major, so I reckon we're in the key of G major to start things off at least. And our first cadence is an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of C major, or is it? We'll talk about it. So first chord D major over F sharp, that is 5-6, our dominant and first inversion. G, D, G, and B, that's our tonic triad where we would expect 5-6 to go. And then we have A, F sharp, C, and A with a non-chord tone here in the melody as well. This is F sharp diminished over A, which is 7-6. And then we have G major in first inversion, B, G, B, and D. 1-7-6, 1-6, pretty normative progression, or the reverse, especially in Bach's chorales. This is where I think we modulate to the key of C. You can make the argument that we modulate on the next beat. This is just where it sounds like the change happens to me when I'm listening to it. So we're going to call this G major chord now 5-6 in the key of C, and then we get G, G, B, and D, which is taking the triad and putting it in root position. This D is a chord tone, this E is a non-chord tone, this F is a chordal 7th, but a non-chord tone as far as the beat, the chord on the beat is concerned. And then we cadence on C major, C, C, G, and E, which is our tonic triad in root position. Now, depending on how you look at this triad, this sounds more like an imperfect authentic cadence than some of the other cadences that do this, but sometimes we don't get the chordal 7th in any of the voices, and we just get a triad, and then we cadence on the subdominant. So I really do think that subdominant cadences should be, at least in terms of describing Bach, they should be something we discuss, because sometimes it really does feel like we haven't modulated and the cadence ends on the 4. It's like 1 going to 4. But in terms of C, that's also the same thing as 5 going to 1. And here we have the natural 7th as well, so it really does feel like we've modulated to C. But regardless, we have a perfect authentic cadence at the end of the next phrase in the key of G major, and we modulate straight away. C, G, E, and E. That's another C major triad. That is our 4 in the key of G major. D, D, F sharp, and A is D major, which is our 5 chord. And then we get D, D, F sharp, and A again with a passing 7th in the bass, so no need to reanalyze. We then have B, D, G, and D, which is G major in first inversion, with a passing tone in the bass before we get G, D, D, and C. I believe this G is an accented non-chord tone, and what we're really looking at is D7 over F sharp, which is an incomplete 5-7 chord in first inversion, which is 5-6-5, or is it? We have F sharp, A, C, and D. So F sharp to D is a F sharp to D is a 6th, and F sharp to A is a 3rd. No, sorry, F sharp to C is a 5th. Yes, so this would be a 6-5 chord. We don't have the 3rd, which would be the 3 and the 6-5-3 if we wrote it the entire figured bass. God, I forgot the word figured bass for a second. But regardless, we move to our tonic triad on the next beat, G, D, G, and B, which is our tonic like I just said. Then we have D, D, F sharp, and A, that's D major, which is our 5 chord. And then we cadence on 1, G major, G, B, D, and G, which is our tonic. Okay, looking ahead, we have another cadence in G major. This one's imperfect authentic though. We have G, G, B, and D, another G major triad, no need to reanalyze. C, E, G, and E, that's C major in root position, that is a 4 chord. A, E, A, and E. This is an interesting chord because we don't know the quality of the chord. I'm going to assume that it is 2, but it might also be 5 of 5. If there were a C sharp in one of these voices, maybe a C sharp in the melody going up to D natural, or a C sharp in the bass going up to D via chromatic bass line, this could be 5 of 5. But because there's no 3rd, we don't know what the quality of the chord is. They both function the same way though, as a predominant chord. Then we have D, F sharp, A, and D, which is our D major triad in root position, our 5 chord. This B is a neighbor tone, and then we have D, F sharp, A, and C, which is taking the chord and turning it into a 7th in root position. This B is a neighbor tone, and then we get another 5-7 chord happening briefly here on beat 4 and before we cadence on G major, which is our tonic triad. Okay, looking ahead, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of D major, so we're looking for a point at which we modulate, and I don't think we modulate immediately, but I think we modulate pretty close afterwards. We have F sharp, D, D, and A, which is D major over F sharp, that's 5-6, and then we have G major, G, D, G, and B, which is our tonic triad. Now, you could say that we modulated as early as this G chord here. Even this D major chord I think would be a suitable place to say we've modulated, because you could say this A, B, C sharp, D already is spelling out the D major scale that we're going to hear, but it really doesn't sound like we've modulated, because 5 to 1 sounds like we're still in the key of G major to me, but I do think this G major is our common chord. It is 4 in the key of D major as well. And the fact that we get C sharp immediately afterwards, that's typically a hallmark of what I look for in common chord modulations, or just where modulations might occur in a chorale. We have E, G, G, and C sharp. That's C sharp diminished over E, which is 7-6. 4 typically goes to 7 or 5. We have F sharp, F sharp, and D, which is D major in first inversion, that's 1-6. Then we have G, E, B, and E, that's E minor in first inversion, which is 2-6. Bach loves 2-6 chords, especially in a cadential format. This F sharp is a non-chord tone. We then have A, E, A, and F sharp. I believe this E is a suspension over the bass, kind of interestingly. I guess you could make the argument that this is a 6-5 suspension over the bass, but I do think a 1-6-4 chord is being implied here. 5-4 suspension, kind of interesting. Typically not a suspension that we see, because 4s are, in a contrapuntal context, often deemed dissonant, at least in terms of old, like early music. But here we have a 5-4-ish suspension. Granted, it is kind of part of just a larger cadential figure or contrapuntal figure, but it goes where we expect to 5. The 1-6-4 goes to 5. A, G, A, and C sharp, another incomplete 5-7 chord, which we can write the bracket for, of course, like we do sometimes. And we have 2 anticipations, one in the melody and one in the tenor, before we cadence on D major, D, F sharp, A, and D, which is our tonic triad. Okay, we have another one of these subdominant cadences akin to the one in the first phrase, or at the end of the first phrase. I'll call it a subdominant cadence for the same reason that I called the other one a subdominant cadence, because it feels like we're cadencing on C, and C, the modulation's very quick, it happens at the end of the phrase, and we go there through G, like this D major chord here over F sharp, D, A, and D. Same chord that we started off with at the beginning of the chorale. This kind of feels like a bit of a repeat. I think this is where we modulate to the key of G major. This is our 5-6 chord now. This A is a chord tone, we don't need to mark it. And then we get G major, G, B, G, and D, which is our tonic triad. This C is a passing tone, and then we get G, D, G, and D, which is just an open fifth. We have no third in there, but seeing as it was preceded by a fully voiced 5 chord, and the only difference between the 2 chords is the B going up to the D here, I think this is still a tonic triad in root position. No real way to mince it or turn it into something else. We do have a passing tone in the bass, so there's like some imitation going on in the lower 3 voices. Passing figure, passing figure, passing figure here. But we have B, D, G, and G, which is G major in first inversion, and I'm inclined to believe that this is where we modulate to the key of C major. We can call this 5-6, just because metrically this is where it's happening in the first phrase as well, and it also sounds that way. Sounds like the modulation's happening here, or it could, possibly be happening here, because the F natural happens on the beat afterwards. G, D, B, and F sharp, which is just taking the chord and turning it into a root position 7 chord. Anticipation in the melody before we get C major in root position, which is our tonic in this case. Now I have an interesting case here. We have, I don't think it really sounds like we're modulating via this dominant here, because this is a secondary dominant, and we could analyze it in a couple different ways, but the way that I chose to analyze it is that this E major chord over G sharp, it sounds like we're moving to an A minor chord, because prior to this we were in the key of C major, and we would expect this E dominant chord to go to an A chord. But if we were in the context of C, we would expect it to be A minor, because that's the quality of A triad that's in the key of C. So I would call this 5-6 of 6. This D is this B is a chord tone as well. We don't need to mark it. But I do think this is where we modulate to the key of D major via a secondary dominant. Here we have 5-6 of 5. Because the next chord is going to be the chord in which we hear the C sharp and know that we're going to some type of D major centric land coming from the realm of 1 sharp. Even though we have an F natural going on here, C sort of feels like a chord that is being tonicized rather than being modulated to, even though it kind of tips very slightly into the modulation side of the spectrum. I'd say it's mostly a tonicized feel, but the F natural does take away from it more than some of the other subdominant cadences we've heard in the past. But yeah, modulating via secondary dominant, it's not the first time we've seen it, but it is relatively uncommon. A, C sharp, A, and E, which is our 5 chord in the key of D major, passing tone in the tenor, A, E, A, and E. Another one of these dominants with a open fifth. It's interesting. Passing tone in the melody. Oh, sorry to not comment on that. We don't need to reanalyze it, because I think we're assuming that it's still an A major triad. It's like we have a little bit of a sequence going on here where the lower voices are moving from the key of C major up a diatonic, or not a diatonic, up a whole step to the key of D major. So I guess you could call this a direct modulation as well, but really this E major chord feels like it's taking me to A minor if I didn't know better, and the A major is a unexpected occurrence. But you could analyze this as a direct modulation as well, I believe. After this passing tone in the bass, we have C sharp, E, A, and F, and I believe this F is an accented non-chord tone. This B is a non-chord tone. I really do think that this is a 6-5 version of the chord where we get the G and the A happening. You could even just call this a 6 version of the chord as well. Or if you look on the downbeat exactly, maybe instead of calling it a 6 chord, you could also call it A, E, A, and C sharp, E, A, and F sharp, which would be like the equivalent of a F sharp 7 chord in second inversion, so 3-4-3. But I think that's kind of unlikely. This just feels like counterpoint going on, and really if it's mirroring or modeled after the previous phrase, we would expect some type of dominant here. And really when we take the aggregate of all of the pitches that are used over the span of this whole beat, the G, the A, the C sharp, the E, the A, the majority of the notes spell a dominant triad. So that's what, or even a dominant 7 chord if you take the G into account as well, which I am choosing to do. It is what it is. I feel like dominance being implied here, but if you are a literalist, you could say, yes, this is actually an F sharp minor 7 chord in second inversion happening on the downbeat, and everything afterwards is purely decorative. But yeah, this is what I think is happening. But the chord gets turned into a root position 7 chord on the next beat, A, E, C sharp, and G, with an anticipation in the melody. So 7-5-3 to reflect the fact that it's in root position. And then our imperfect authentic cadence in the key of D ends with 1, D major, D, D, A, and F sharp. Okay, looking ahead, we have movement to the key of G major, but our phrase ends in the key of E minor. So I think this D chord is also functioning as our dominant in the key of G major, as G follows it immediately. G, D, B, and D, which is our tonic triad. We then have C, C, G, and E, that's C major in root position, that is a 4 chord. Then we have B, G, B, and D, that is G major in first inversion, which is a 1-6 chord. Then we have A, C, E, and E, that's A minor in root position. This A is a non-chord tone, so we don't need to, it is a chord tone, we don't need to mark it. Then we have movement to the key of E minor. I think this A minor chord is also 4 in the key of E minor. We then have D sharp, F sharp, B, and F sharp. D sharp, F sharp, B, and F sharp. Yes, that's B major over D sharp, which is 5/6. And then we cadence on E minor, E, E, B, and G. So we see this adjacency where we are harmonizing notes in the G major scale. We have C major, D major, and E minor in terms of the keys that the cadences occur in, with G major happening in the middle, but the cadences occur adjacent to one another, right? C, D, and E, those are all chords in the G major scale, which is kind of interesting. It's an interesting scheme where we're seeing modulations and cadences in the keys of chords that are diatonic to the scale. But as we're closing in on our last phrase, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of G. I think we modulate straight away from the key of E minor. This E minor chord is now our not our subdominant, our submediant. We then have F sharp, A, and D, similar to the first chord that we had at the beginning of our chorale. That's 5/6. We have G, D, B, and D. That's our tonic triad, G major in root position, passing seventh in the bass, passing tone in the alto. We then have E, E, G, and C. That's C major in first inversion, which is 4/6, passing tone in the bass, or passing tones in the outer voices, because we have one in the melody as well. We then have C, E, G, and A. That's A minor 7 over C. Bach loves 2-6-5 chords. This F sharp is a non-chord tone. We then have D, D, F sharp, and A, which is our 5 chord. That's where we would expect 2-6-5 to go. Anywhere different would have been an interesting talking point. This G is an anticipation or a delayed 7th, depending on how you look at it. Oh, no, it's not a delayed 7th. I'm still thinking we're in the key of D major. No, this is definitely an anticipation. And then we cadence on G major, G, B, D, and G, which is our tonic triad in root position, closing out our chorale. And that is today's analysis. All in all, some interesting takeaways. We have a modulation via secondary dominant, or at least that's how I hear it. Again, if that's not how you hear it, you could say that you modulate as early, or you could say that this is a direct modulation. I think it sounds like we have no real reason to believe that we're going anywhere other than A minor at that point, so that's just sort of how it sounded to me when I was thinking about where that G sharp wanted to go. Other than that, the chorale is pretty much functionally harmonic. These quick little modulations to a different chord almost plays like a deceptive cadential role. But, you know, the fact that there is the leading tone in there, the fact that there is some dominance going on makes it feel a lot less temporary than some of the other subdominant cadences or alternative cadences that we have bumped into in the past. But on that note, I'm going to cap the video off today. Thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel. If you're interested in following along on this journey, feel free to subscribe and hit the notification icon if you'd like your daily dose of analysis or a daily dose of Bach in particular. I have hundreds of videos scheduled for the future because I'm currently analyzing a Bach chorale every day. So if you'd like to be notified about when I upload, like I said, subscribe and hit the notification icon. Again, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.